Jasmine had just finished a tiring grocery run and was looking forward to getting back home to relax. As she walked down the street, she noticed something out of place. Her eyes were drawn to a man lying on the sidewalk, his clothes dirty and tattered, curled up in a fetal position, and his chest rising and falling slowly as he slept. Jasmine's heart sank as she realized that the man was homeless. She had seen homeless people before, but there was something about this man that made her pause. Maybe it was the way he looked, so vulnerable and alone, or perhaps it was the fact that she wasn't used to seeing him around. At first, Jasmine tried to ignore the sight, reasoning that there was nothing she could do to help. However, the image of the sleeping man stayed with her long after she had reached home. It was as if his presence had etched itself into her mind, and she couldn't shake it off. The next day, as Jasmine left for work, she glanced over at the spot where the man had been sleeping the previous day. To her surprise, he was still there, curled up in the same position. Jasmine's heart sank once more as she realized that the man had spent the entire night sleeping on the cold pavement. She knew she couldn't just ignore the situation any longer. Jasmine was running late for work and didn't have the time to stop and talk to the man sleeping on the street. She was in a hurry and had to focus on getting to work on time. Despite not being able to help the man in the morning, Jasmine had a good day at work and soon forgot about the man sleeping on her street. However, when she returned home that evening, she was shocked to see that he was still there. The weather was chilly, and Jasmine couldn't bear the thought of the man being cold and uncomfortable while sleeping on the street in tattered clothes. She quickly rushed into her house and grabbed a warm blanket. Approaching the homeless man, Jasmine introduced herself with a friendly, "Hi, I'm Jasmine," before handing him the blanket she had brought. She then took a seat on the curb and asked if he was homeless, as she had noticed him in the same spot for a few days. The man, who introduced himself as Dean, confirmed that he had indeed lost his business and home and had no choice but to live on the streets. He went on to explain how his business had collapsed due to the embezzlement of funds by greedy employees, leaving him bankrupt and unable to pay his bills. Sadly, he had to lay off more than 500 employees and also lost his house and car in the process. As Dean spoke, Jasmine couldn't help but feel a sense of empathy and sadness for his situation. She asked him if he had any relatives he could stay with, but he replied that he had none. Living on the streets was his only option. After their conversation, Jasmine was determined to help Dean. Though she didn't have much wealth herself, she knew she would find a way to assist him. As they parted ways, Jasmine made plans to gather resources to help Dean get back on his feet. Despite being an orphan, Jasmine had a compassionate heart. Later that evening, Jasmine cooked a generous amount of food for dinner and shared it with Dean. She continued to do so for the rest of the week, and during their meals, they talked for hours, growing closer with each passing day. Jasmine and Dean's relationship was growing stronger by the day. They enjoyed each other's company and shared many common interests. Jasmine admired Dean's resilience and determination to overcome his situation. She knew that with her help and encouragement, he could rebuild his life. Jasmine was a hard worker and was always looking for opportunities to make some extra money. She even took on a part-time job to save up enough money to rent a small apartment for the two of them. Dean was grateful for Jasmine's kindness and support and promised to do whatever he could to make things better for both of them. Over the next few months, Dean worked hard to get his life back on track, and Jasmine stood by his side, offering encouragement and support every step of the way. Dean was finally able to secure a job, and he was determined to make it work. As time passed, Jasmine and Dean's love for each other only grew stronger. They were a true example of how love and kindness can overcome even the toughest of situations. After several months of being together, Jasmine and Dean had already started planning their wedding. However, when Jasmine shared the news of her engagement with her friends and extended family, they were not as supportive as she had hoped. Her uncle's voice boomed over the phone as he exclaimed, "You're marrying a homeless man." Jasmine confidently replied, "Yes, we're in love and we'll work things out. No situation is permanent." Her uncle gruffly said, "Well, it's your life and your choice," before hanging up. Jasmine couldn't help but feel disappointed that her family wasn't more supportive. Jasmine wasn't too bothered by the lack of response from her family after she sent them an invitation to her wedding. She had been distant from them since her parents passed away and anticipated that they wouldn't show up. Anyway, the invitation was only an act of politeness. On her big day, Jasmine looked absolutely stunning in her elegant wedding gown and couldn't wait to begin her new life with Dean. She adored him deeply and couldn't help but feel elated at the thought of being his wife. Despite sending out invitations to their loved ones, not many turned up for their wedding. However, those who did come seemed to be there only to witness what they believed to be the worst decision of Jasmine's life. "I can't understand why she would marry a homeless man when she has a good job, drives a decent car, and lives in a nice neighborhood," questioned one of Jasmine's friends. "I wouldn't marry a homeless man even if I were dead," laughed another. "The fact that she worked so hard to attain a comfortable life only to end up in poverty with a homeless man shows she's making a big mistake," another person said. Although Jasmine couldn't hear the whispers in the hall, she could sense that her friends were mocking her. Regardless, she didn't care one bit about their opinions. And then, the groom arrived, and everyone gasped. They expected to see a man in tattered clothes, but instead, he arrived in a luxurious limousine, wearing one of the most expensive tuxedos available in the city. But how could he afford all of this? Wasn't he homeless? Jasmine was shocked. Was this really Dean? She could only watch as he walked elegantly into the small room. He looked like he owned the world, and Jasmine had never been so perplexed in her life. Once he reached the front, she caught a whiff of his cologne, and she almost fainted from how good he smelled. She tried to speak up, but Dean shushed her, asking her to be patient as he would explain everything after they exchanged rings. As the bride and groom stood reciting their vows to each other, Jasmine couldn't help but feel like she was in a dream. Despite her attempts to get an explanation, Dean only responded with, "Just be patient, honey. I'll explain everything soon." After they promised to be there for each other through thick and thin, Dean picked up the microphone and turned to his new wife, Jasmine. "I know this must all be overwhelming, but you'll understand everything in just a few moments." He then addressed the guests. "I have never met someone as kind, caring, and selfless as Jasmine. I am at a loss for words. I am honored that she loved me when I had nothing and was sleeping on the street. But what I really want to talk about is the reason why I believe you are all here today." The guests shifted uncomfortably, realizing that he had exposed their true intentions. "To be honest, I was never actually homeless. I fell in love with Jasmine long before she even knew me. But I wanted to test whether she could love me for who I am, not my wealth or social status." The crowd let out a collective gasp. Jasmine's heart was racing as she exclaimed, You weren't homeless." Jasmine was in a state of shock, her mind still racing with disbelief as Dean revealed the truth. "You mean to tell me that you are not homeless? You come from a wealthy family, and your company is still running and successful?" she asked. Dean nodded. "Yes, honey, I wanted to test your love for me to see if you would accept me for who I am and not what I have." The guests were stunned into silence, realizing they had misjudged the couple. To fall in love with and marry a homeless man takes true strength and unconditional love, Dean continued. "Jasmine has proven that true love exists, and I promise to give her the world because of it." Dean then pulled Jasmine into a tight, emotional embrace. Jasmine couldn't shake the feeling that she was still dreaming. At the wedding reception that evening, as she stepped out of the limousine, she expected to find a regular reception at the venue. However, what she found was something straight out of a fairy tale. The decor was made up of her favorite flowers in every color imaginable. The food was an elaborate culinary display of imported dishes. Jasmine had never seen anything so magnificent, and the most unbelievable part was that it was all for her. In the end, it turned out to be the happiest day of her life. Days after the wedding, Dean helped Jasmine move all of her belongings into his stunning, resort-style home with its high ceilings, breathtaking views, and abundant natural light. Jasmine was overwhelmed by the luxury of her new surroundings, and tears of happiness streamed down her face as she stepped onto the impressively detailed floor of her new home. The news of Jasmine's marriage to Dean quickly spread throughout the neighborhood, and some of her friends, an extended family who had not attended the wedding because of Dean's supposed homelessness, began calling her to congratulate her. Moral lesson: this story teaches us not to judge people by their appearances or assumptions. True love is based on understanding, empathy, and acceptance, not on material wealth or social status. It also reminds us that love can overcome adversity, and kindness can lead to a beautiful, unexpected outcome.